Right, so we are looking at serving tonight. We are in our series on the thriving church. And for those who were invited into membership tonight, one of which being a community group leader, so, but we'll just backdate that, right? We can just, yeah. So, You will have been given a little book when you were at the welcome lunch, and I'm sure that you studied that well. You studied it super well that you could tell me what all of our values are, right? You can recite them all. Janice, you look keen and ready to go. Two of our values. You can go on our website, you can read them there. Worship and family. I want to read them to you. Worship. We believe that God has given everyone a gift with which we are called to serve Him as an act of worship to the best of our ability. And family, we believe that God calls us to family, so we do our part in building family values. And these two values I really believe are tied together wonderfully under this banner of serving. Worship, family, and it's something that we live out here at Lighthouse, and I'll get to that in a bit, but it's something that we model here. And as we've been going through this series on the thriving church, each week of the series has tied into one another in some way. And it's for good reason, because none of the things that we've been speaking about as part of the thriving church can exist in isolation. They can't. As soon as you remove one and try to get it to exist in isolation, it will crumble in some way. Because we need all of these things to be a thriving church. And tonight is no different. There'll be themes tonight that you'll remember when we spoke about church in week 1, when we spoke about unity, guarding the unity, when we spoke about worship. So let's go to Matthew 22, 36 to 40. One of the religious leaders, a person who was well-versed in the law, approached Jesus. And he asked Jesus the question, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." What does that mean? The entire Hebrew Bible, the entire Old Testament, hangs on these two things. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, everything. Love the Lord your God with every fiber of your being. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And I would say that this is the why behind serving. This is the why behind serving. We serve because of the love we have for God and the love we have for one another. This is our why. You don't need to be coerced or manipulated or told to serve for any other reason other than these two things: love God, love people. How do we do this? We serve one another. This is the why behind serving. And when you look at early church culture, when you look at the early church, when you read through Acts and you see what the believers were doing, you kind of get the sense, even though it wasn't always explicitly said, and they served one another like X, Y, Z, you got the sense throughout the book of Acts that they were living in service to one another because of the love they had for God. And because of the love they had for God, they had an intense and deep love for one another. And when we speak about early church culture, it's not about trying to replicate that exactly. Okay, we know the world is a very different place, right? We know that the world looks very different. Our lives look very different. And so, in Acts 2, 42 to 47, which we'll read now, it says there that every day they met together. Every day they did this and that and the other. And it can be tough to meet every single day now, right? If we did church every single day, if we had a service every single day, Trev, I would ask for a sabbatical. I would, okay? But, and so life looks very different now to what it was. But that doesn't mean we look at the early church and throw it out as, well, life is different, and so we can't realistically try and do things like that. I think we can very realistically see it as a blueprint for how we ought to act with one another, how we ought to do church today. It's not about looking at life and going, oh, it's so different, and so what's the point? But seeing it as a blueprint for how we ought to approach serving one another. So let's read Acts 2, 42 to 47. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. And while it does not explicitly say the words, and they served each other by doing this, that, and the other, you just get the picture from how they were living and how they were doing life. That service was just a part of who they were. Serving one another, loving one another. I mean, breaking bread, having each other over in their homes and doing that on the regular. Hospitality, giving, not only of money in their possessions, but of time. Every day meeting together in the temple courts. Giving of their time, giving of their resources, giving of themselves. That's what I'm getting at here. Giving of themselves, the very fiber of their being, they were sharing with one another in love and in acts of service to one another. And so you just know from reading any account of the early church that these people knew what it meant to love and serve each other. So what happened then? What happened? I think it's just the advent of so many things, technology and stuff, and as the ages have continued and as they will continue, and as the world and life and society move further and further and further away from God and His design and His word, you will begin to see the fragmentation of love thy neighbor. And in all honesty, it is not an expectation that we can have of the world. It is a commandment that Jesus gave to believers. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Okay? So love the Lord with everything you have. That is not something that an unbeliever would be doing, right? Right? It's a commandment given to all of mankind, but it's a commandment that for us as believers we hold ourselves to. God, I want to love you with every fiber of my being. And as a result of my love for you, God, I love my neighbor. I love others. And so when we see the world and we see the fragmentation of love and affection and service and anything that God would ask of us in the world, we've got to look at ourselves and go, is it present here? If it's not present here, are we looking more like the world, or are we looking like the church that God has called us to be? And that is a church in active service to and for one another. So, three things to look at tonight about service and how we can ensure that as a thriving church, we're getting this right. That as a thriving church, we are prioritizing service and what service looks like to us. First one is to open our eyes. To open our eyes. If you go through life with blinkers on, you go through life with your eyes closed, go through life blind to what's going on around you, you are never, ever going to see the need that God has called you to meet. It's about opening your eyes. We sang a song this morning, Hosanna, and there's a line in that song that I've struggled for my entire Christian life to sing. break my heart for what breaks yours. That's a tough line to sing. That's a hard one. Break my heart for what breaks yours. Everything I am for your kingdom's cause. That's quite a heavy line to sing. But that's ultimately what we as believers should be asking. We should be saying, God, open my eyes to see the need. 1 John chapter 3, verse 16 to 18. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? It's a strong statement, strong question, right? How can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. It's one thing for us to gather on a Sunday, proclaim, Jesus, I love you. But there is no love in our hearts for those around us. And all you have to do is read through the book of 1 John. It's a heavy book. I'd encourage you to read it slowly, meditate on it. Because as you read through the whole book, you see countless encouragement and countless challenges. That actually, if we say, God, we love you, that has to be seen in the way we love one another. It has to be evidence in that, not just us saying the words, God, I love you. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? So I left Firehouse, and the very kind of next thing I did was went straight into a young adult community. And Tristan had started the first young adult community at Lighthouse. We met in his place, and it was an odd group of people, but we were a great group of people. But I remember one day, Tristan loved to challenge us with quite big things, and I remember he just put it out there, and he said, guys, like, what does this look like for us to be able to be in community together, right? So he wanted to get this heart of community across. But the example he used for 18-year-old Cuan, who had lived at home and was now like kind of just starting to earn like a little bit of money and stuff on his own, and now was, I can now buy all the things I want to buy, and I've got no expenses because, parents pay for everything still, and it's just a wonderful, privileged life I'm living. Tristan then opens his mouth and he says to us, guys, I want us to be the kind of group that is, if someone can't pay their rent, that we band together and pay their rent for them. Right? And in my heart, I genuinely went, I don't know if I can be part of this group. I don't know if I'm going to last here. Firstly, I don't know how far my 20 rand will get anyone in their rent. I don't want any of you coming to me afterwards saying, I need rent, please don't go. I saw Jared. Jared's really keen now. He's going, this is great. I'm sorry for anyone in Jared's community group. You guys will be hearing it now from next week. But I remember him asking this question, and genuinely in my heart I was conflicted because it was the first time that such a real-life scenario, right? Such a real-life scenario had been thrown out. When you go to youth and you're encouraged to do these things, they're kind of smaller things. Buy your friend a chocolate at break time. I can do that. That's not that hectic, And then you're learning about missions and going overseas, and you're going, I'm a teenager. Not really for me. I'll just buy my friend the chocolate at break time. As soon as I leave high school, I'm thrown with this very real world scenario of like helping someone pay their rent, and I go, that's a step too far. That's a step too far. Because I was so self-focused, so selfish. And we're all like that. We're all selfish. We're all in need of a Savior. But when I read 1 John 3 and I go, dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but in actions and in truth, I go, yes, God, if I say I love you, it's got to be more than lip service. It has to. It has to. And the way I love you is to love people. And so we see a need, we meet a need. It's very simple, actually. It really is simple. And I think at Lighthouse, I think we've made serving really quite simple. I don't think we've complicated it. Complicated it? That's right, eh? Yeah. We've not complicated it at all. And so if you're here and you know that there's something that God is stirring in your heart, or maybe you're seeing a need, maybe you're going, this is somewhere I can serve, don't complicate it for yourself. Ask any of us. Ask any of the pastors. Just, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. I'm thinking of serving in this area. You know, God is stirring in my heart to do this. Is there a ministry like that here? Do you know what's really cool? Is if you pipe up and say, is there a ministry like this? And we say, no. Great, let's start one. Let's start one. Because God is, not saying might be or could be. As a child of God, God is stirring in your heart. He is speaking to you. There's no doubt about that. He's always speaking to us. And so He will be speaking to your heart. It's not a matter of if. It's not a matter of, God's speaking to every other person about serving, but not to me. No, He is. You're just walking around like that or like this. He's always speaking to us. I think it's very, very easy. I mean, I use the example of being encouraged to help pay someone's rent, and I go, it's very easy when something like that is said to you to rationalize in your mind why that's not your calling. That's not for you. That's for the other people in the group to do, And so when God speaks to you about stepping out in service and getting involved somewhere, you go, that's for someone else. That's for the other people. I'm just kind of here. I remember hearing Matt Chandler. For those of you who don't know who Matt Chandler is, it's not the guy from Friends. He is actually a pastor in America. And I remember him giving a sermon, and he was speaking about, getting involved in church and what church means. And he used the example of a couple that came up to him after a service one day. And they were new. They were there for the first time. And he was chatting to them. And he was saying, what brought you here, etc. All the kind of normal questions you'd ask. And they said to me, we're kind of just looking. We're trying to find a church that suits us. We're trying to find a church that meets our needs. And he very confidently said to them, well, I really hope you find it, because it's not this one. And, you can decide whether it was an arrogant statement or not. It was a true statement. Because in the kingdom of God, it's not about us. It's not about meet my need, Jesus. It's not about, hey, everyone else, meet my need. It's about how can I serve you? How can I serve God? And how can I serve you as my brothers and my sisters whom I love dearly? And so we open our eyes. We see a need. We meet a need. Second thing is we check our hearts. We check our hearts. So you've opened your eyes, you've seen the need, and you feel nothing. We check our hearts. 1 Peter 1:22. Now that you've purified yourself by obeying the truth, so that you have sincere love for each other, love one another deeply from the heart. Sincere love for one another. Love one another deeply from the heart. And in 1 John 4:19-22, we love because He first loved us. Whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister, whom they have seen, cannot love God, whom they have not seen. And He has given us this command: anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister. If we are apathetic towards serving the very people we ought to love, how can we claim to know God? I'm not trying to manipulate. I'm not trying to use emotive language. That's what the Bible says. Our attitude towards one another is a very clear indication of whether we have recognized God's love in our lives and whether we truly love Him. Our attitude towards one another is a very clear indication of that. Consideration for one another is the most obvious sign of a redeemed heart. Just general consideration. And when we're being considerate towards one another, that means we're thinking of others. And when I'm thinking of others, I'm thinking of how I can serve them. That's what thinking of others looks like. That's what being considerate looks like. How do my actions affect you? And how can I meet your need? And so when we consider the love of God in our lives, when we consider how we ought to see others, my question is, how is that actively playing out in your life? Because this is the thing about service. It is active. Service is not a passive thing. It is an active thing. You actively sign up to get involved somewhere, which means then you are actively going and doing something there. If I was passively part of the worship team, what would that look like? This is me drumming. That's what passive involvement would look like, right? It's a dumb example, but it's a good one in my mind because I'm going, it makes no sense, right? To be passively a part of something. Let's say at least I'm playing something. Passive involvement would mean I'm not coming to practices. I'm not getting involved. When I am here, I'm not talking to anyone. But service is active. Service is active, which means I actively choose to get involved somewhere because I want to actively love you. I want to actively love God because Jesus very actively loved me on that cross. And so we do this out of our love for others. But when it comes to checking our hearts, we also have to decide, am I doing this just for the approval of man? Just because I want others to look at me and go, hey, you're serving, well done. That's not the motivation to serve. We do it because we're doing it for God. 1 Corinthians 10 and twice in Colossians 3, we're told that whatever we do it as unto God. We do it for His glory, whatever it may be. And so, whatever it is that you're doing, if you are already serving the church, if you are already serving your brothers and sisters, or if you have yet to step out and do something, don't do it because you're wanting a pat on the back. Don't do it because you're needing the fulfillment in your life of having others see you and say, good job. That's a need, that's a part of your heart that Christ ought to be filling. And if you're struggling with that, new creation is a great thing to do. I've done it, still struggle with it. Why? Because it's a long process, right? But I now know what that looks like in my life. Anyone who knew me would be able to say that I was a people pleaser. It took until doing new creation to realize, hey, I'm a hectic people pleaser. And so I realized that for me, a lot of my service came from wanting others to see me and say, hey, you're doing a great job. Problem is that when burnout comes along and then you can't really do all the things that you were doing, then what is your identity? And so we go, God, everything I'm doing, I want to do it for you. And it's not because you're looking at me, God, and saying, yes, my son, my daughter, I love you more now because you're doing these things. No, He loves you entirely now. Our service to Him is done out of devotion to Him, is done out of thanksgiving to Him, is done because of the love that He has shown us, not to gain more love from Him. And so whatever we do it for God, which also means that we do it to the best of our ability as part of our values here. We believe that God has given everyone a gift with which we are called to serve Him as an act of worship to the best of our ability. And so whatever we do, we don't go, oh, well, I'll put, half of me into it, because I just feel like that now. Because I woke up this morning and I'm a bit tired. We're always a bit tired. Everyone's tired all the time, right? We're always tired. It's no longer an excuse. We're always tired. I realized very, very quickly that being a parent, I'm running out of days that I can use it was a bad night as an excuse. I've realized that now, because those days will just continue. And so I just have to now deal with it. But we want to do everything as if we're doing it for God, right? So we open our eyes, we check our hearts. We say, God, do I love people and do I love you? If I love people, I want to serve them. And if I love you, God, I want to do this as if I'm doing it for you and for you alone. Which means I want to do it with the best of my ability because, God, you are worth all of me and so much more. And finally, we serve because we're family. It's who we are. We are family. Galatians 6, verse 9 to 10. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. The ESV says household of faith, which is quite significant. There's many references to household in Scripture, or family of, or whatever the phrase may be in whatever translation you're reading. And in the early church, all kind of religious activity happened around the household. And the household had significance. It wasn't just your kind of immediate family. Now our household is our immediate family, and even there, sometimes we barely speak to each other, But household for them was more than just immediate family. It was extended family. It was even just kinship relationships. It was this wider group. And there was this very real sense of familial responsibility there. There was this very real sense of family and connection, even to those who were not family by blood. Now, that sense has been lost today, right? That sense has been lost in the world. The family unit has become fragmented and all but destroyed. And so it's for us as believers to go, right, if we're going to do this thing, if we are going to be a family, as God describes family, it needs to be more than what we see in the world. It needs to be way more than that. And so let us not grow weary in doing good, because we're a family. We're a household of faith, which means we have familial duty to one another. If you're a kid and maybe you have chores and you know that your sibling has a similar chore at home and your sibling doesn't do the chore, you get upset, right? Maybe some of us grew up in a home where maybe you had two parents, but one parent did everything. And so you get the sense of what it's like when someone in the family doesn't do their part. It's felt, right? It's felt. You can feel the disconnect when someone in the family doesn't do their part in building family values. And it's one of our values, as I read. We believe God calls us to family, so we do our part in building family values. Part of service and part of seeing each other as brother and sister and part of understanding us as a family and a household of faith is that we all do our part. We all do our part. Because when we all do our part, not only is the load lifted, but it's felt. The connection to one another is felt. The love one another is felt. Not because we preach it from here, but because it's felt everywhere. Because we're in service to one another. And so it is actively felt. I believe honestly that we have a wonderful culture of service here at Lighthouse. And I think I can speak on behalf of staff when I say we are unbelievably grateful for each and every one of you who serve. Unbelievably grateful. We kind of take a moment every year at the honor dinner to kind of just like look. Just look at how many people there are. At how many people have put their hand up and said, I want to get involved. I want to be a part of the family. I want to do my part in this wonderful family. And so to all those who are involved, I want to say thank you. To all those who serve here, week in, week out, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Because the love one another is felt here for that very reason. Because we're living in service. And for those of you who are sitting here and maybe you're not yet involved, maybe you've not yet got involved in a ministry, maybe you're still sitting on the outskirts and you're looking in, maybe you're involved and you're just not actively doing anything here. I want to encourage you tonight. I want to encourage you to just think about it. Give it some real thought and to ask yourself, how are you loving and serving the family? How are you loving and serving your family? Because this is your family. If you remember here at Lighthouse, this is your family. Yes, you have your own family, but this is now a new family for you. Welcome. It's nice to have you. So where can you serve? Have you given it any thought? And then what have you done with those thoughts? It's time to put them into action.